We're here.
We are here.
Good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Our faithful listeners, watchers.
It most certainly might not be morning if you're watching this some other time of day.
Where are we?
We're towards the end. Things are getting a little bit
dicier and dicier, yes. I actually wanted to kind of address that. When we first started the Mahatma Letters series, we had no idea what direction it would take. I did know that I wanted to cover the information about how to become a chela, what was involved, because that didn't seem to be very well understood in the theosophical world. So I knew I wanted to cover that, but I thought we would be able to speed through a lot of the other information.
Yeah, right.
It didn't turn out that way. As we got deeper into it, I realized that we did need to cover all of that because there were little nuggets of information all along the way. And those nuggets are in our 87 previous sessions. So for those of you who think, oh, they're not teaching us any secrets. No, they're not secret, but they're hidden. They're planted in different spots along the way, and you have to search for them.
That's why they do appear secret, though, because they're not readily obvious to most readers.
And K.H. pointed this out in one of the letters. I don't remember which one, but he said, we reveal lots of things, and they're not just revealed in our writings. They're revealed in other writings. You have to search for them, and if you don't have discernment, that is the key, discernment. You won't be able to find them. You won't be able to assemble all of the different pieces from so many different sources. And he said that's by design. That's not a flaw. No one is going to give you a manual and say, do step 1, 2, 3 through 232, and you will become an adept. Never going to work that way. The other thing he said was, you have to force the Mahatmas. And you do that by making yourself so purified, so essential to their work, that there's no way they can turn you down. That's how you force them. I was trying to figure out one of the other letters that comes at the end of the series. Remember, there were 4 very short letters or notes, messages that were unidentifiable as far as date. And so the compiler of the chronological edition simply put those 4 at the end, labeling them A, B, C, D. Well, we had identified 2 of them, more or less, where they really belonged. But I knew that there was another one that could possibly be identified, and I think I have narrowed it down. This is letter C, as it's named in the letters. And as I said, we have no idea exactly when it was received, by what method, when it was transmitted, anything like that. So by the subject, I went back through everything that we have studied, and I figured out there's only one place that could actually belong.
Ooh.
A mystery. So I think it could only have occurred during that period when, remember, a number of people were invited to visit the Gebhardts in Elberfeld, and Sinnett and his wife weren't invited at first, and they were annoyed. It can only have happened because they decided on their own to go to the Lakes District of Switzerland and Italy. And while they were touring that area of Europe, K.H. had the Gebhardts send them a telegram to join them in Elberfeld. Mm-hmm. So I think this is the only time that that could have occurred, and you'll see by the subject. So let's go ahead and read this mysterious letter C.
Okay.
And this is obviously from KH to Sinnett.
Can you manage to pick up 3 pebbles for me?
3 pebbles. Talk about mysterious.
They must come from the shores of the Adriatic, preferably Venice, as near as possible to the Doge Palace. Under the Bridge of Sighs would be the most desirable, except for the ancient mud.
I'm not quite sure how you would find pebbles under the Bridge of Sighs because, as he says, it would be deep in the mud, but who knows?
The pebbles must be of 3 different colors, 1 red, 1 black, 1 white, or grayish. Oh my goodness. If you manage to get them, please keep them apart from every influence and contact except yours, and oblige, ever yours, KH. What?
Yeah, another one of those very strange ones. 3 pebbles, 1 black, 1 white, and 1 red. So what was he going to do with them? Was he intending for those to be somehow transmitted to KH, or was Sinnett to keep them? Perhaps KH had in mind that he could magnetize those 3 pebbles and that they would serve as a conduit between him and Sinnett. I don't know for sure. Pure speculation.
It might have been one more effort to maintain a connection with him and further his progress, perhaps.
And the strange thing is that Sinnett, in his writings, never mentioned this. I don't know if he just was so upset at not being invited that he just disregarded it or what. But he never mentioned it in anything that he wrote about his life.
Do you think this letter was found with every other letter in the same? Okay.
Yeah, and it's in the KH script, so it's easily identified as one of the Mahatma letters.
I was just thinking if it wasn't with all the others, maybe somehow Sinnett never even got it, maybe. But he did, if it was with everything else.
He did, yeah. So another mystery that maybe will be solved at some point, but we've contributed our part as far as kind of isolating, I'm pretty sure, because that was, as far as I can tell, the only time that Sinnett would have been anywhere near the area of Venice. Now, what was the opinion of people at the time in 1885 that we're talking about right now? We've kind of seen that through the letters, but what is the opinion of people today? It's pretty much, for the vast majority of people, the same as it was in 1885.
You mean specifically regarding the masters?
Yes, regarding the masters, the origin of the teachings of Theosophy. Most of the people today who just have a vague understanding of Theosophy throw it in with occultism, New Age stuff.
I think we might want to make the distinction, though, between people that are aware or study Theosophy versus everybody else that's spiritual in nature, because the masters exist in both realms, and there's a very different opinion of them depending on if you're in the theosophical world versus if you're just in the general spiritual communities of the world.
And if you're part of the group that's in these side groups, these split-off groups, like the I Am movement and the Ballards and the Elizabeth Clare Prophet crowd, you've taken your teachings and they've been strangely manipulated and Christianized.
There are countless others, though, not just those, and they're usually referred to as ascended masters. That's usually how they're referred to in other circles, not Theosophy. Ascended masters, and there are others that are added, and their images are fancified. There are bookmarks with them on there and posters, and it's almost like they become celebrities.
And everything is very emotional. If you try to read any of the channeling that comes through, it's all emotion, 100%. You compare the letters that we are studying with their revealed messages, it's night and day. But if you get caught up in that, it can be a waste of time, but it can also lead you down the wrong path to where you end up being more on the left-hand path, because they teach teachings that are very self-centered and about how can it help me, as opposed to how does it make it possible for me to help the world and to uplift everyone spiritually and get rid of ego. If ego is involved, run away from it. Do you think we've preached enough about getting rid of ego?
I mean, I don't know if we can preach enough until we actually start doing it.
Yeah, that's right.
But is that what you wanted to say about the main opinion of most people about the masters today?
Yes, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. Some people lump us in with spiritualism, just anything occult. So it's not highly regarded by very many people, is what I'm saying.
Oh, and that's actually it's important for us to know, because you may run into that. I do in the yoga world. I run into people who have heard of theosophy, but they've heard of it in a very negative light, which is just ridiculous and sad. And we've mentioned some things from Sam Harris that he's written that are just completely derogatory. And I keep hearing things about that. They're misunderstood. They haven't studied. You make your own, like I'm making my own opinions, and I'm ascertaining from my perspective that there is nothing nefarious going on here, even though sometimes theosophists are portrayed in that light. The I Am movement you mentioned, is that the one that's centered around Mount Shasta?
I'm not certain. There are so many different ones.
Okay, there's a relatively major spiritual group that's based around Mount Shasta, and they have ascended masters. Many of them are the same names, Master KH, Master Morya. And if you go to Mount Shasta or you Google anything relating to this, you'll inevitably see the masters, and they're depicted very differently, like visually differently, but also the way they are explained and how they're in constant communication. And Maitreya is another huge one. And,
yes,
yeah.
And Saint Germain.
Yes, and
they love that
yes.
name, Saint Germain, for some reason.
Yes, it's a little sad that theosophy is so rich, and yet it's not viewed that way.
No, without discernment, it's very easy to get off into one of the side paths that are exciting. They are exciting, I'll give you that, but they're not useful at all.
Do you mind if I add one more little thing here? It's actually very relevant. Terry and I both are on YouTube all the time. Pretty soon we can get college degrees on YouTube, probably. But just this morning, I saw a video from a yoga philosopher, I would call him, someone that I hadn't seen before. I don't even remember his name. It was a short 15-minute video titled something along the lines of The Lie of Modern Yoga. The Lie of Modern Yoga. And I watched it this morning as I was getting ready, or I listened to it rather. And he was explaining something that is exactly this, how 99% of people in the world view yoga. And when we say yoga, I'm relating the word yoga to the physical practice that we do in studios. How 99% of people who say they're doing yoga are actually not. There's 1% of people who actually practice yoga, who are the yogis of the world. And I think you know where I'm going with this. The eradication of the ego and the studying of the ancient wisdom from a non-selfish perspective is the ancient yoga, unifying our lower selves to our higher selves and then to the all self. So what is the 99% of other people, what are they doing? Or we, because I go to yoga studios and I teach physical yoga. This guy was really cool. He said, we're actually bhogis, not yogis. And the term, it sounds funny, like, oh, there's a bogey, shoot him, like in military. But B-H-O-G-A, bhoga. Bhoga is the opposite of, I guess you could say the opposite of yoga or the opposite of vairagya. Bhoga is the pursuit of sensation and pleasure and enjoyment. And being in the physical world and entrenched in the world and not really having a spiritual practice, you'd be considered a bogey. You're in the world and you derive most of your meaning and purpose and pleasure and pain and everything from the physical world. And this guy was saying that that's what 99% of yoga people are doing. We put on Lululemon clothes and we go to a studio in order to feel something sensational and to be part of a community, which isn't inherently bad. Feel muscular strength and sweatiness and take a selfie after you're done with your friends and you feel like, oh, I stretched, I got a good workout. That's pure boga. That's not really yoga. And that's really what's going on. Is it bad? Not really. It's healthy. You're doing exercise. But yoga is this. It's connecting with your higher self and eliminating the ego. If you can do that and go to the studio and do the physical practice, that's cool, but most people don't. We should be aware of what we're doing.
Any of you who are not aware, there is a Theosophy subreddit on Reddit. And you really owe it to yourself to check out some of the posts on there. It gets all kinds of comments, but a lot of people don't realize, and you'll find out right away, they think that Theosophy is the same as just general spiritualism or spirituality or the occult, or that it's a catch-all. It's not. It's very, very specific. And one of the commenters, who I regard highly, made the comment one time when someone was talking about whether or not people actually embodied the teachings, if they adapt them in their own lives, the teachings of Theosophy, said that in his experience, there are perhaps 10 people in the world of Theosophy who were actual Theosophists.
Oh my God.
10 who actually take these to heart and practice them religiously, so to speak, and are 100% devoted to that. Most of them are more like Paul says. They pick and choose. Oh, I don't like that. I know KH or HPB said that, but I don't agree with that, so I'm just going to ignore that. And they accept only certain teachings that make them feel good. And they say, yeah, I'm a theosophist. No, you're not. If you don't have faith in the Mahatmas and what they teach, at least try to understand why they have different points of view from the general public. You're not a theosophist. You may be a card-carrying theosophist, but you're not a theosophist.
10, huh?
Yeah, deep. Let's keep going here. Now, we haven't received a letter in quite a while. When was the last letter received? Actually, the last letter that we covered was from HPB. The last letter that was received from the Mahatma, KH, was in November 1884.
I'd be getting nervous if I was Sinnett.
I'm sure he was, but on the other hand, he was losing faith in HPB. He had pretty much driven her away, and he had been trying to use Mrs. Holloway as a medium to contact KH, and he was convinced that she had been able to contact Mahatma KH. He was getting confirmation of his own personal views about what was going on, and he was convinced that HPB was manipulating the information because it didn't match what his expectations were.
And where was HPB at that
She
time?
was at Adyar. Remember, she went back to Adyar in November 1884, arrived in December, in time for the national convention that they have every year at the end of the year. And so she was there. Sinnett was in London the whole time.
Her health was very, very poor.
Yes, it was. And it was getting worse, as we'll see, because of all of the chaos and all of the stress caused by the missionaries and the spiritualists and the English people, Anglo-Indian people. Getting worse by the day, and by Hume. Hume was one of the worst. Now, this one is from KH again, but we don't know exactly when. Based on the contents, it was sometime in the spring of 1885, but that's about all that can be said about it. And we don't know how it was received, but Sinnett received it in London sometime during the spring of 1885.
My friend, you asked me to throw some light on the, quote, new distressing event arising from Mr. Arthur Gebhardt's fanciful accusation.
And that's what HPB had covered in her previous letter. So that's how this got tied with that. She said that Arthur Gebhardt, in conjunction with Mohini, was starting to accuse her of fraud, of committing fraud. So they are falling prey, many of the theosophists are, to the information that's being leaked out from the Society for Psychical Research. They haven't issued their final report yet. That wouldn't happen until the end of 1885. But they were issuing interim reports, and it looked very, very bad. And many of the theosophists were beginning to believe those reports.
For that matter, dozens of events of a far more distressing character, each of them calculated to crush the hapless woman chosen as victim, are matured and ready to burst over her head, and are wounding the society just as badly.
So basically like a hand grenade.
Again, I should have guessed that after my abject failure to satisfy your rigorous logicians, I like that, your rigorous logicians in the Billing Massey and the Kittle Light incidents, my personal opinion and explanations were held in small esteem in the West. You seem to think, however, along with Whewell, that every failure is a step to success, and your confidence in me must seriously alarm your friends.
All right, let's see. Again, I should have guessed that after my abject failure to satisfy your rigorous logicians in the Billing Massey and the Kittle Light incidents. Billing and Massey was the one where C.C. Massey, from early on, was getting suspicious of the events. Remember, HPB, after she had visited London at the beginning of 1879, took a pair of gloves with her because C.C. Massey wanted the Mahatmas to help his father with some eye problem that he had. She mailed one of the gloves to him, and the other one dropped on his face during a seance with some other medium. But he disregarded that completely. Also, they tried another experiment where KH transmitted a letter to C.C. Massey through Mrs. Billing, who was also a medium. Remember her spirit guide was Ski?
Ski, the Native American.
Ski, yes, the Native American. And they used him, Ski, to cause the letter to appear. Wow. And C.C. Massey didn't believe that either. Right. So no matter what they tried, the English wouldn't be satisfied. They were never satisfied. And the same with the Kittle incident. Remember, he was accused of being a plagiarist, of copying the words from one of the spiritualist newspapers. And KH explained everything thoroughly to them, and they still wouldn't believe it. So he's basically given up on trying anything. There doesn't seem to be anyone in England who is willing to stand up for them. Then he said, so since you don't believe that, you obviously don't have any esteem in the West for my opinion and explanations of things. He said, however, you seem to think, along with Whewell, that every failure is a step to success. So Sinnett does have a kind of strange optimism that even if you fail, it's still a step towards success, and I have to agree. If you treat it properly, it is. And Whewell was a devout religious person much earlier in English history. He was a don, a professor at the Christian College of Cambridge. But he apparently had a similar saying to that.
With your permission, I have left the explanation of the distressing incident to Madame B. herself.
So that was in the last letter that we received about Arthur Gebhard. Go back and watch that if you haven't yet.
As she wrote only simple truth to you, however, there is very little chance of her being believed, except perhaps by a few of her close friends, if she has any left by the time this reaches you. You must have understood by this time, my friend, that the centennial attempt made by us to open the eyes of the blind world has nearly failed. In India, partially, in Europe, with a few exceptions, completely. There is only one chance of salvation for those who still believe, to rally together and face the storm bravely.
All right, so all of the storm clouds have gathered. Mm-hmm. It looks like it's going to let loose. And the Theosophists are becoming more and more divided on everything, fighting amongst themselves, which only helps their enemies. Our centennial attempt, what is this centennial attempt?
100th?
At the end of every century, the spiritual hierarchy makes some kind of an attempt to further the teachings in the outer world.
Oh, every 100 years.
And it's the last quarter of each century. Obviously, this is the attempt for the 19th century because the Theosophical Society was started in 1875. And that was the attempt, a major one. They're not always that major. What the attempt was in 1975, I'm not certain, but I'm certain that there was an attempt made. It may have been more subtle. It may have been more in the realm of laying groundwork for the forthcoming one in 2075. We're only 49 years away from that.
Is it always 25 years before the turn of the century, though?
Yeah. And it has been going on apparently since about 1475. So it's not thousands of years, but a few hundred years.
Really? Huh.
Yeah. So they don't give up. And here's the other thing. I think they're being especially careful and working very hard because our society is moving so fast right now that more and more people are catching on to information that never would have been available 100 years ago. And it is so readily available today, people are changing their opinions so fast that they are becoming raised in their awareness on the outer planes, but not on the inner planes. And if they turn that learning in the wrong direction, meaning to selfish aims, they're going to end up on the left-hand path. And I think that is why the Mahatmas are struggling night and day to get more and more people in the outer world who are on the right-hand path and can serve as an alternative to people who are completely involved in selfish goals. It's crucial if the majority of people are not going to end up on the left-hand path.
That is really interesting that every 100 years they make a special effort to further humanity.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if you're around in the next 50 years, do your part. Do it now. Don't wait.
Let the eyes of the most intellectual among the public be opened to the foul conspiracy against theosophy that is going on in the missionary circles, and in 1 year's time, you will have regained your footing.
One other thing that I didn't cover, you must have understood by this time, my friend, that the centennial attempt made by us to open the eyes of the blind has nearly failed. In India, partially. In Europe, with only a few exceptions, completely. So the Indians have fared better than the Europeans have. The Europeans are on the verge of being completely cut off. Remember, we pointed out that if HPB wasn't going to serve as a conduit to the Europeans, they had no one. None of the Asian chelas were willing to do that. None of them. They had their own communications. The Europeans could only go through HPB because no one else had qualified for that post that was willing to do it. The only one willing to do it.
Why do you think their experiment in India nearly failed as well? That's
because
India.
the British were in charge of India.
Okay.
They were creating chaos, and many of the local people were believing the nonsense that they were spewing. So
Got it. Okay.
it was only the faithful who were willing to keep their mouths shut and to follow the masters on their own. Mm-hmm. And they were being restricted even in India.
In India, it is, quote, either Christ or the founders. Let's stone them to death. My gosh, really?
It's the Christian missionaries.
Jesus.
They are bound and determined to destroy theosophy.
That is
Why?
crazy.
Because theosophy was interfering with their converting the Indian people to Christianity.
My
their
goodness.
whole existence was in jeopardy. If we don't kill out theosophy, they're going to destroy us. Well, guess what? 140 years later, Christianity hasn't made any great inroads.
Oh my gosh.
But they sure were bound and determined to destroy theosophy.
They have nearly finished killing one, and now they are attacking the other victim, Alcott. The Padres are as busy as bees. The PRS has given them an excellent opportunity to take advantage of their ambassador, Mr. Hodgson, who fell quite easily a victim to false evidence, and the scientific impossibility of such phenomena helping to disprove the reality of the phenomena he was sent to investigate and report on. The phenomena is totally discredited.
So in this case, the religious people and the spiritualists were willing to use science to disprove theosophy. When it served their purposes, they believed in science. When it didn't serve their purposes, they rejected it.
He may plead as an excuse the personal disappointment he felt, which made him turn in a fury against the alleged authors of the, quote, gigantic swindle. But if the society collapses, it will be due to him. We may add the praiseworthy efforts of our mutual friend of Shimla, A.O. Hume, who has not, however, resigned, and those of Mr. Lane-Fox. What society could withstand the effects of two such tongues as those of Mr. Hume and Mr. Lane-Fox? While the former, taking into his confidence every theosophist of note, assures him that, since the beginning of the society, not one of the letters alleged to have come from the masters was genuine, Mr. Lane-Fox goes about preaching that he is only carrying out the wishes of the Master M in acquainting the theosophists with all the defects of the TS and the mistakes of its founders, whose karma it is to betray the sacred trust they had received from their gurus.
So many of the theosophists are joining the enemies and saying they have been duping us. They are fraud. And foremost among these enemies within their own camp was Hume on one hand and George Lane-Fox. Two of the people, by the way, who are on the council, the TS Council. And although Hume is fighting against the society, he's still a member and he's still on the council. So the Mahatmas, as we say, just let things take their course. They don't worry about the future. They let people learn their lessons on their own. Now, I want to read something because Hume has been telling everybody that this has been a fraud from the beginning. The Mahatmas never really did exist. Let's see if that's true. Let's go back 3 years. 1882. someone named Mohini M. Chatterjee wrote a letter from Calcutta to A.O. Hume. And he was asking about what he knew about theosophy. So he starts it with this. This is August 1882, and then start from here to the end.
By birth and other circumstances, I have a strong inclination for mysticism, which my so-called English education has not been able to remove entirely. I have to a certain extent made myself acquainted with the philosophy of yoga, as practiced by our ancestors. My knowledge is extremely limited, no doubt, but it has been sufficient to make me a thoroughgoing believer in yoga vidya, yogic wisdom, the existence of the Himalayan brothers, and the statements made with respect to them by Madame Blavatsky do not make any demand upon my credulity to believe in them.
He's a fairly new theosophist at this point.
I have reason to believe that you have received proof positive of the existence of the brothers and their connection with our society, to the services of which you have devoted your life. I appeal to you, therefore, as a gentleman and a brother, to communicate to me how you have been satisfied of the connection of the brothers with our society, and also to state what good have the brothers done either to yourself or to anybody else.
All right, so that was from Mohini to A.O. Hume. And we have the reply. It isn't dated, but obviously was directly in reply to Mohini's letter.
My dear brother, that the brothers exist I now know, but the proofs that I have had been purely subjective and therefore useless to any but myself.
Okay, but it's still useful for me.
Unless indeed you consider it a proof of their existence that I here at Shimla received letters from one of them, my immediate teacher, dropped upon my table, I living alone in my house, and Madame Blavatsky, Colonel Olcott, and all their chelas, etc., being thousands of miles distant.
Imagine that. So he receives letters while he's alone, at home. Olcott and Blavatsky are either in Bombay or Ceylon.
He would say, oh, I was lying. I wasn't telling the truth. But then how can he be trusted? Or I was made to say that. They forced me to.
He conveniently forgot.
Yeah. I have certainly devoted my life, or what little remains of it, to the furtherance of the cause of theosophy, hoping and believing that I may thereby do some little good, both by helping to lead many to join us on the platform of universal love and charity, and some few to join us on the higher platform of spiritual self-culture. As to what good the brothers have done either to myself or others, I am not in a position to reply. I am not even a chela, only a lay disciple, and know little more of what the brothers do than yourself. But if you consider the establishment of the Theosophical Society a good thing, then this is one, at any rate, of the good things done by the brothers for others. And if you think it a good thing for me that I have turned away altogether from all worldly objects of desire and am devoting myself entirely to trying to do good for others, then I suppose we may say that this is a good thing which the brothers have helped to do for me. Yours fraternally, A.O. Hume.
All right, so in 1882, he was firmly convinced of their existence and their desire to help the world spiritually. In 1885, it was a complete fraud, all invented by Madame Blavatsky. All right, well, let's continue.
After this, perhaps you will blame our chelas less for detesting the Europeans at headquarters and saying that it is they who have ruined the society.
Yeah, so he's defending the Asian chelas who want nothing more to do with the Europeans. They're tired and sick of all of their nonsense, and I can't blame them.
Thus, my friend, there comes a forcible end to the projected occult instructions.
Say that again?
Thus, my friend, there comes a forcible end to the projected occult instructions.
Well, can't say you didn't tell him.
Everything was settled and prepared. The secret committee appointed to receive our letters and teachings and to convey them to the Oriental group was ready, when a few Europeans, for reasons I prefer not to mention, took upon themselves the authority of reversing the decision of the whole council. They declined to receive our instructions through Subarao and Damodar, the latter of whom is hated by Mr. Lane-Fox and Mr. Hartman. Subarao resigned and Damodar went to Tibet. Are our Hindus to be blamed for this?
So they had it all set up that their Asian chelas were going to receive the instructions and the doctrine from the Mahatmas, and they would transmit it then to the Europeans. Hartman, Lane-Fox, and Hume voted it down. They said, no, we're not going to go along. We don't accept that.
And now Hume and Hodgson have goaded Subarao to fury by telling him that, as a friend and fellow occultist of Madame B's, he was suspected by the government of also being a spy. Come on.
Yeah, remember, Hume said that all of those chelas who claimed to know the Mahatmas should resign because they were telling a lie. The Mahatmas don't exist, therefore you are lying.
It is the history of the Count Saint Germain. Oh, there we go. That's funny that we just mentioned him a moment ago. It is the history of the, quote, Count Saint Germain and Cagliostro told over again.
Yes, both of those were kind of magicians in the 1700s, Count Saint Germain and Count Cagliostro. They were mysterious figures and very mistrusted by the Europeans because they claimed in some cases to be very, very old, much older than their appearance, and claimed to have abilities of manifesting things. But they were probably, in some cases, very advanced spiritually, but they may have had some defects also. So the Europeans mistrusted them completely. So that's what he's saying, is that HPB and these chelas are being treated like people treated Cagliostro and Saint Germain in the 1700s.
But I may tell you, who have always been faithful and true to me, that the fruits of your devotion shall not be allowed to decay and crumble into dust. And now may I say a few words that may prove useful. It is an old truism that none of you have ever formed an accurate idea of either the masters or the laws of occultism they are guided by. Wow. For instance, I, because I have received a bit of Western education and imagined as the type of gentleman who strictly conforms his actions to the laws of etiquette and conforms his intercourse with Europeans according to the regulations of your world and society. Nothing could be more erroneous. The absurd picture of an Indo-Tibetan ascetic playing a respected statesman need hardly be noted. Nevertheless, having failed to conform to that description, I was hung in effigy and publicly branded and degraded, as Madame Blavatsky would say.
So they expected him, because he had some European education, to dress up in their clothing and adopt their ways and give them proofs that would satisfy their opinions of what proof would be. Scientific evidence, irrefutable. And because they weren't willing to do that, they discount everything.
When will you realize that I am nothing of the kind, that if, to a certain extent, I may be familiar with your peculiar notions about the propriety of this thing or another, and the obligations of a Western gentleman, so are you, to a degree, acquainted with the manners and customs of China and Tibet. For all that, as you would decline to conform yourself to our habits and live according to our customs, so do I, preferring our modes of life to yours, and our ideas to those of the West. I am accused of, quote, plagiarism. We of Tibet and China don't know what you mean by the word. I do, but this is no reason, perhaps, why I should accept your literary laws. Any writer has the privilege of taking whole sentences from the dictionary of Peiwen Yunfu, the greatest in the world, full of quotations from every known writer and containing all the phrases ever used, and to frame them to express his thought. This does not apply to the Kittle case, which happened just as I told you, but you may perhaps find throughout my letters 20 detached sentences which may have been already used in other books or manuscripts.
The Pewun Yunfu was a type of thesaurus, a comprehensive book that was published in 1711 that pertained to all writings in China. And it gave quotes and instances of each one of those. It was a reference dictionary at the time. And it was profound. It included a lot of knowledge about everything that had been published in China. And he's saying anybody could have taken any of those quotes and repeated them, and they wouldn't be accused of plagiarism. Now he's going to explain more about the ideas of plagiarism and what is and what isn't plagiarism.
When you write on some subject, you surround yourself with reference books. When we write about something and the Western opinion on it is unknown to us, we surround ourselves with hundreds of paragraphs about this particular topic from dozens of different works impressed upon the Akasha.
Yeah, remember our example before? They just get this flood of information in the Akasha. And out of all of that, hundreds and hundreds, they pick and choose what is helpful to them. And they have to be very discerning in which ones they accept and which ones they discard.
Then why be surprised that I should occasionally use a whole sentence and apply it to our own idea? I have told you about this before, and it is no fault of mine if your friends and enemies are not satisfied with the explanation. For the Kittle business, it is your own fault. Why did you have the Occult World printed before sending it to me for revision?
Now, I have to defend Sinnett a little bit here. He would have done whatever KH expressed to him, but he left it wide open. He told him, I trust you. I leave it open to you. You can use anything except that last letter you received from me. And so, yeah, KH isn't always 100% correct.
I would never have allowed the passage to pass, nor the Lal Singh either. Yeah, but he gave him free rein.
Exactly. So he's kind of backtracking on his authority.
Mm-hmm. Nor the Lal Singh either, foolishly invented as half a pen name by Jwal Kul, and carelessly allowed by me to take root without thinking of the consequences.
Ah, so it was Jwal Kul's fault that he came up with this last name of Lal Singh, which apparently wasn't his real name.
Huh, really?
But as we said, they use different pen names all the time. They're not going to reveal their real name that they use with their chelas.
We are not infallible, all foreseeing Mahatmas at every hour of the day, good friend. We've said this many times before. None of you have even learned to remember that much. And now for occultism. We were expected to allow the occult forces to be treated in the same manner as the physical forces in nature. We are taken to task for not giving to every educated man who joined the TS the fruits of the researches of generations of occultists who had all devoted their lives to it, and who had often lost their lives in the great struggle of wrenching her secrets from the heart of nature. If we didn't do that, occultism would not be recognized.
That's been the problem from the very beginning. The Mahatmas would tell them, you have to earn everything you get. And Hume said, no, that's not how we do things in the West. Just give me all the information you've got. I don't care if it isn't in proper order. I will do all of that. I will edit it. I will change it to make it applicable to the Western world. I will take care of that, but you have to give me the information, all that you've got. He said, no, we don't operate that way.
Mm-hmm. Thus, it has to remain in the realm of magic and superstition, spiritualism in the sight of some, and fraud in the opinion of others.
So that's how the Europeans classify it.
Who thought for one instant that an occult law, once revealed, ceased to be occult, and then became public property, unless it was given to an occultist who dies before he betrays the secret? What grumblings, what criticism on Devachan and other subjects for the incompleteness and many supposed contradictions. Oh, blind fools! They forget or never knew that he who holds the keys to the secrets of death holds the keys of life, that everyone could become a creative god in this race, acquiring knowledge so easily that there would be no need for a sixth and seventh race. Wow.
Yeah, so remember, we're only at the fifth root race. There are still 2 more root races to go. And we're in the 4th round, which is the round of human development. So he's saying that they want enough information that they can just skip these last 2 root races and go right straight to being adepts. Well, you still have to pass through all the steps, and they're not, no, that's not how we do things in the West.
And that we should have perverted the program of being, garbled the accounts of the book of life, and defeated the eternal will.
So what they're asking them to do is to go against the spiritual hierarchy. They will never do that.
Of course not.
But the Europeans are saying, no. You tell us what you've got. Give us everything. We're way smarter than you think we are.
My friend, I have little, if anything, more to say. Oh my gosh. I deeply regret my inability to satisfy the honest, sincere aspirations of a few chosen ones among your group. At least not for the present. If only your London Lodge could understand, or even suspect, that the present crisis that is shaking the TS to its foundations is a question of perdition or salvation to thousands. A question of the progress of the human race or its regression, of its glory or dishonor, and, for the majority of this race, of being or not being, of annihilation in fact. Perhaps many of you would look into the very root of evil, and instead of being guided by false appearances and scientific decisions, you would set to work and save the situation by disclosing the dishonorable doings of your missionary world.
So instead of fighting about everything, why don't you show how dishonest the missionaries are and have some faith in us?
Meanwhile, accept my best wishes, KH.
Now, it wouldn't be a KH letter
If you didn't
without
have
a
a PS.
PS or 2 or 3. So let's keep going.
Do you think he genuinely wants to finish and then he realizes there's more to say, or what?
Yeah, I think so. He is verbose. Remember, early on in the letters, he said, I very seldom get a chance to actually write in English. And so he said, I do tend to get a little carried away sometimes.
So right after he signs the letter, I believe I'd better tell you once more what I want you to always remember. Okay, this makes sense. This is good. I would be glad if every question could be answered as easily as your query about the, quote, distressing event.
That was Arthur Gebhardt.
Why is it that doubts and foul suspicions seem to beset every aspirant for chelaship? My friend, in the Masonic lodges of old, the neophyte was subjected to a series of frightful tests of his fidelity, courage, and presence of mind. By psychological impressions, supplemented by machinery and chemicals, he was made to believe himself falling down precipices crushed by rocks, walking spiderweb bridges in midair, passing through fire, drowned in water, and attacked by wild beasts. This was a remnant of a program borrowed from the Egyptian mysteries. The West, having lost the secrets of the East, had, as I say, to resort to cunning deception. But in these days, the vulgarization of science has rendered such trifling tests obsolete. The aspirant is now assailed entirely on the psychological side of his nature. His course of testing in Europe and India is that of Raja Yoga. Wow. He says Raja Yoga right there.
That's the answer.
Has he mentioned the actual words Raja Yoga before?
Yes, a few times, but just kind of in passing.
Wow. I better read that again. Okay, look, let me go back just a little bit. This was a remnant of a program borrowed from the Egyptian mysteries. That's the whole, like, the terrifying tests. The West, having lost the secrets of the East, had, as I say, to resort to cunning deception. Wait, but what is he talking about, the cunning deception?
The deus machina, the physical contraptions.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah,
the cunning
because
deception?
they weren't able to use magic.
Okay. But in these days, the vulgarization of science has rendered such trifling tests obsolete.
Because they would be figured out immediately.
Okay. The aspirant is now assailed entirely on the psychological side of his nature. His course of testing in Europe and India is that of Raja Yoga. Okay, we've been saying this the whole time, but now he says it very clearly. And its result is, as frequently explained, to develop every germ, good and bad, in him and in his temperament. The rule is inflexible, and not one escapes, whether he writes us a letter or in the privacy of his own thoughts formulates a strong desire for occult communication and knowledge. As the rain cannot cause the rock to bear fruit, the occult teaching also has no effect upon the unreceptive mind. And as the water develops the heat of caustic lime, so does the teaching fiercely awaken every unsuspected potentiality latent in him. That's interesting. The teachings, the true occult teachings, fiercely awaken every unsuspected potentiality latent, developing every germ, good and bad.
Yes. No sooner do you start on this path of becoming a chela, where you raise your hand, then you will start being tested from every side. When you least expect it, it brings out the best in you, but it also brings out the worst in you.
We might have said that a few times, but this is really good to repeat. Wow.
No, it's grueling, absolutely grueling to go through the boot training. And most people fail. And they get as many chances as they want. But there may be a 20-year delay in between before you're given another chance, or it may happen in a future lifetime. So nobody fails forever until they just give up. So never, ever, ever. That's why they always say never give up. Try, keep trying.
Wow. Few Europeans have passed this test.
Imagine that.
Suspicion followed by self-woven conviction of fraud seems to have become the order of the day. Self-woven conviction of fraud? Oh. I tell you that, with a very few exceptions, we have failed in Europe.
Yeah, they have failed in Europe. And we should learn from that. Theosophists today still are convinced that somehow these Mahatmas are going to conform their teaching to European ways. They're not. You better adopt some Asian ways of thinking and doing things, simplifying your life, and talking less and stating opinions less. You better make some major changes in your life if you have any inkling, any desire of becoming a chela. Do not believe that you can tread the spiritual path in the outer world. You can start it that way, but you have to start receding from the outer world and embracing entirely the inner world, which is daunting, it is difficult, and it means getting rid of a lot of things that you cherish and hold dear to your heart.
Henceforth, the policy of absolute neutrality of the TS in occult teachings and phenomena will be rigidly enforced. Whatever is imparted will be to individual members from individuals. For instance, if Madame Blavatsky finds the necessary strength to live, and this depends entirely on her will and its powers of exertion, and if she is willing, under the guidance of her guru or myself, to serve us as an amanuensis for you, Sinnett, not for the group, she can, if she likes, send you weekly or monthly instructions.
All right, so she's still willing to do that too. The Europeans in India said, no, we don't want this group of Asian chelas. We're not going to accept directions from them. HPB said, I guess I'll be willing to do it myself if they won't accept directions from a group of Asians. But he said, she will only give the instructions to you, Mr. Sinnett, and then you share them with the group. It didn't happen, so...
He's basically saying that this is close to the very end. He's saying...
Yeah, and they still leave a door open, and Sinnett just closes it.
Mohini could do the same, but under the pledge that neither our names nor that of the sender will ever be made public, nor shall the TS be made responsible for these teachings. Huh. Really? Why would he say that? Because they would be ridiculed. They would be saying, oh, they're fake. Is that why?
Well, it's because everyone has to test them themselves. And the TS always states, we're all interpreting these policies and these doctrines on our own. There is no dogma for the TS.
Okay, that's
You're
what he's
not
saying.
required to believe anything. We're
right.
just stating how we see things, and that's completely proper.
But when he says the TS shouldn't be made responsible for them,
Right.
they are responsible of getting them.
Well, meaning for their validity. You have to test
okay.
that yourself.
Okay. If the Oriental group survives, something could be still done for it, but never again shall the society in India be allowed to be compromised by phenomena that are denounced wholesale as fraud. The good ship is sinking, friend, because its precious cargo has been offered to the public at large. Wow, it's almost like it's been desecrated.
Yes, exactly.
Sacrilege.
Pearls before swine.
Exactly. Because some of its contents has been desecrated by profane handling, and its gold has been treated like brass. Oh, that's really metaphoric and profound.
And that's the problem with giving something to people who haven't done anything to earn it. It's a free gift. Here, let me give it to you.
Jesus said that pearls before swine, right?
Yeah.
That's what he was talking about, isn't it?
Esoteric Christianity is completely valid if you can understand it.
Henceforth, no such profane eye will see its treasures, and its outer decks and rigging must be cleansed of impurity and dross that was accumulated on them by the indiscretion of its own members. Try to remedy the evil done. Every step made by one in our direction will force us to make one toward him.
Again, you force the masters by becoming a worthy receptacle. It involves purification. It involves faith. It involves having faith that what they're teaching you has validity. But then you have to put it into practice. You can't just treat it as a good idea and do nothing with it.
But it is not by going to Ladakh that one shall find us, as Mr. Lane-Fox imagines.
So one more idiot thinks that he can go find the masters by finding out where they live. So remember, they split their time between Ladakh and Shigatse, quite far apart.
Once more, accept my blessing and parting greeting, if they have to be my last. K.H. Gosh.
And that, dear viewers, was the very last letter that Sinnett received from the Mahatma Kutumi.
Boo.
You can't say he didn't try. He did receive a very short note, which we will cover in a future episode, but we're not certain when it was received. It could have been at any time, but it fits in with this period, so that's when we'll present it when it's proper. But that was the last letter that he ever received from KH. So many missed opportunities by Sinnett and all of the other Europeans. It's sad, and yet it's not to be unexpected because, as I say, it was given to them without their having done any work. But they had to test someone. They had to make the attempt with someone just to get enough information out before the public that other people could say, okay, what went wrong? Figure it out. Let me figure it out. How did all of these people fail, one after another? So many people had the chance. Number one, ego. No, couldn't be that. Couldn't be that. Give me something else. It's because you have to purify yourself. Oh, okay, then I will stop eating meat and I won't have sex with anybody except my married partner. Well, guess what? They were willing to take C.C. Bassi as a chela, and he had 8 illegitimate children. 8. He failed, but it wasn't because he had 8 illegitimate children. He failed because he was an idiot. All of these people failed, one after another, because they insisted it was going to be their way. You have to prove it to me. No, you have to prove it to yourself. And the only way you can do that is by developing discernment and one after another putting into practice every single thing that is contained in Raja Yoga. He said it right here in this letter. Raja Yoga is the key. No, it can't be that. So now we have one other interesting thing. After a very long time, Sinnett does hear from Morya again.
Wow.
Letter 137, received at London probably 6 months later, more or less, in the autumn of 1885. And I tried to look up what he was referring to. He puts in quotes at the very beginning, common people. So I assumed that maybe HPB or someone else, one of the other chelas of the Mahatmas, sent something to Sinnett that referred to that common people, and yet I couldn't find where that might have come from. So he just starts off, no greeting.
Common people are the masses, as opposed to those who are distinguished.
So the hoi polloi, basically, not the elite in London or Europe.
Your methods were not abandoned. It was only intended to show a drift of cyclic change, no doubt, that is helped by you too. Are you not man of the world enough to bear the small defects of young disciples?
And he never has been. None of the Europeans were willing to accept the fact that some of the Asian disciples were young and not very astute. Think of Babaji and some of the others. But they had other qualifications that the Europeans did not have. But they weren't willing to accept them as chelas. So they disregarded almost everything that they had to say.
In their way, they also help, and greatly. A power to help from your side is also concealed in you, for the poor society will even yet need all it can get. It is good that you have seen the work of a noble woman who has left all for the cause.
That's HPB. Gave everything.
Other ways and times will appear for your help. For you are a single witness, and knowing the facts well, that will be challenged by traitors. Wow, so Morya is kind of encouraging him still and offering.
Oh, yes. Neither one of them ever give up on anybody. No, they don't. They never, ever give up. So they keep trying even after someone fails. They still, once in a while, will put a thought form near them to see if they respond.
We cannot alter karma, my good friend, or we might lift the present cloud from your path. But we do all that is possible in such material matters. No darkness can stay forever. Have hope and faith, and we may disperse it. Wow.
Hope and faith.
And they may do the lifting of the cloud.
Yeah.
Wow.
They never, ever, ever stop trying.
There are not many left who are true to the original program.
We'll hear that phrase again.
You have been taught much, and have much that is and will be useful. Morya.
They have invested so much in Sinnett. And that, by the way, was the last that he heard from any of the Mahatmas, that short note.
Wow.
But the Mahatmas never, ever give up. They're there. They're waiting. But if you haven't made progress, ask yourself why. You need to, like I said, adopt the ways of the Asian chelas. They live very simply. They don't need a 5,000 square foot house or a fancy car. And they have complete faith in the Mahatmas. If they even suggest something, they jump on it. And they have, by discernment, proved to themselves that what they teach has value. We have to do the same thing. And get rid of ego, get rid of our need to impress people. Don't care about what anyone thinks of you, not even your theosophical friends. That, in my opinion, is a huge obstacle. There is a society of theosophists that becomes a detriment to your own personal progress because you feel like you have to fit in with what their beliefs are, and you don't dare deviate too much from that. That restricts you greatly. You have to have courage, dauntless courage, to go outside the circle and let them talk bad about you. Don't worry. The Mahatmas don't care who says what about them. They don't. If you're afraid that your theosophical friends are going to discount something you said or say something bad about you because of what you're doing, don't worry about it. If you're convinced that you're on the right path, do it. Don't be afraid. If you're afraid, then you're not material to be a chela. So many lessons. We're not done yet, but that's the end of the instructions from the Mahatmas. We've got a lot to discuss because we're not going to leave people hanging. First of all, we're going to bring up to date all of the people. We need to cover the history of what happened after this. So we will bring forth all of the history, good and bad.
Are there any other letters in the book?
The other letters are from HPB. Remember, he had several letters from HPB mixed in with these, and they do pertain to information from the Mahatmas. So we will cover those. That will be our next session, 89. But no, we are not done yet. We have a lot of ground to cover because our goal is to explore as deeply as possible what went wrong and to figure out where we need to go from here to change directions, because a change needs to happen in you and in the outer organization and in your position in the outer world. So stay tuned and buckle up. It doesn't get any easier.
My gosh.
But an exciting, exciting ride that we're on here. Thank you for your faithful work, and we will see you in the next session.